Hi, everybody. Thanks for bearing with us. My name is Adele Frizzell, and Tiffany Buck is with me today. And we're going to be talking about all things carbs. The title of this Facebook Live is Carbohydrate Strategies for Insiders Only. We're going to talk about the benefits of carbs. Do you need carbs? What are the ideal amounts of carbs if you're active, losing weight, trying to build muscle, etc.? Because there's different scenarios. If you have any questions during this Facebook Live, please comment below. We are happy to answer any and all questions, and we'll be monitoring the chat over the coming week. So if you have any questions there, you can just comment below and tag one of us.
And we already have someone on, and that is Erica, and she said hi.
Beautiful. Hello. Okay, so I don't know if you realize, but there is this war on carbs these days. You know, there are good carbs, there are bad carbs, and there are extremists on either end. We like to believe we have a very moderate a philosophy when it comes to carbs. We really believe in all the food, and it's one of our hashtags. And our other hashtag is no bad foods. We think there's room for carbs for everyone, no matter what their goal is, whether it's fat loss, weight maintenance, performance, etc. So I want to ask you. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that it's important to point out here is that when we say carbs, we're really talking about all carbs. We're talking about the donuts. We're talking about the cakes. We're talking about the fruits and the vegetables and the potatoes. So no bad food. Let's go ahead and
exactly
verify that.
Yeah. I mean, do you really want to live in a world where you can't eat fruit or potatoes or cake or bread because they're banned and considered the enemy? It really sounds like radicalization to me.
Yeah.
And in case you aren't aware, the battle of the balls really breaks down into a few things. One is, on one end, you have people who think that the really bad guys are these sugary refined carbs like candy, cake, sugar, soda. You really need to watch your sugar because sugar is evil. The other one is there's, the somewhat less bad guys are things like bread and rice. Still really bad to some people, but not as evil as sugar is. And then come the starchy vegetables and fruit like white potatoes and bananas and carrots and grapes. And the radicals will believe that this stuff will still kill you because of the high sugar content. And for the extremists, the only good carb is really a green carb like broccoli, spinach, kale, and cucumbers. So what side are you on? Where do you fall in this spectrum? Personally, Tiffany and I believe in all the carbs. We believe in getting in our nutrients from a variety of fruits and vegetables and grains. And the more diversity and the more colors of the rainbow, the better for your gut microbiome and your digestive health. Really, vitamin deficiencies, because people don't eat enough of wholesome carbs, can happen. And vitamin deficiencies can create poor health outcomes for people. Just like... Go ahead.
I think that it's really important to note here that you're getting the majority of your vitamins from your carbs. That's where they come from. And fiber, all of your fiber is from carbs.
Exactly. You can't get it from fats or protein. And unfortunately, less than 10% of Americans get the recommended fiber in their daily intake. So because they don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. And, while we eat mostly fruits and vegetables and grains and stuff, we also eat treats. I mean, I love me some baked goods. But the problem with obesity doesn't really boil down to whether a person should eliminate bread and fruit from their diet. The healthiest populations in the world eat a high amount of carbs. And we'll talk about that in a moment because I have a presentation to give you today. We worked hard on this slideshow and we'll be sharing it in a moment. The problem of obesity is one of chronic overeating, lifestyle, and a lack of activity. So food quality is one component, but not the most important for weight loss. People can get shredded eating Pop-Tarts. People can get fat from eating clean. Both calories and food quality really matter because the Pop-Tart eating crowd are not going to experience optimal health and performance if the majority of their calories come from crap food, right? Similarly, a person who eats clean but remains obese will likely experience serious health consequences over time.
Mhm.
Bottom line is you do not have to cut out fruit and bread and the occasional sugary treat from your diet to lose weight. And you might even find that your body weight and your health improves, as well as your workouts, when you eat a variety of food in sufficient amounts. So we really believe in all the carbs. And we really believe in stopping this disordered, fractured, black and white thinking about food, because I think it's really making people unhealthy mentally and physically to go to these extremes.
So you said something earlier that I kind of want to touch on real fast. You mentioned that people chronically overeat. And I want to point out that a lot of the times people do not realize that they're overeating.
Correct.
Because, I mean, if you have fast food twice a day and go out for dinner that night, chances are you are way above your body's daily caloric needs. But if you, I mean, even just one meal out at a restaurant, depending on what you get, can take you way beyond your daily caloric needs. But without truly understanding nutrition, then there's no way to really see how that does affect you. So it's kind of interesting when you stop and look at everything and you say, well, I only ate X, Y, and Z today. Okay, well, X was 500 calories, Y was 700 calories, and Z was 1200 calories. There's your daily allotment plus some, depending on your size and your activity levels. So the more you know about yourself, the more you know about nutrition, the more you can apply the science behind it in order to see the results that you want.
Yeah, when you separate the feeling from the actual data. And as a perfect example is yesterday, I ate 3 small healthy meals and I was like, oh, I actually was probably in a calorie deficit. And then I realized, oh, but I had this protein bar and this piece of chocolate and this and that, and it put me way over my daily calories for the day.
Mhm.
So what feels like eating well, may actually not be until you start documenting it, which is one of the things we have our clients do when they work with us, because then they become much more self-aware and mindful about their intake. And there's lots of aha moments. All right, so let's get started with this presentation. It is a short one. I'd love it if you had some questions for me. I'm just going to set this up right now. And it's on carbohydrate requirements. And I think you're going to be, hopefully, quite surprised by some of this information.
Yeah. And it's really pretty. It's a pretty slideshow.
Thank you. Have there been any questions so far?
Nope. Joan's on and she says hi.
Hi, Joan. Okay. So when we're going to try to break some of this technical stuff down for you, but if you have any questions, let us know.
Oh, so Erica did say, I just refreshed it, and Erica did say all carbs in moderation. So that's awesome. Love it.
Yes, exactly. That is great. Okay, so surprisingly, for some, carbohydrates are not actually essential for survival. Okay. Now, the body does need glucose, and the easiest way to get glucose is through carbohydrates. You can also manufacture this with a really clunky way called gluconeogenesis, which we'll get into in a moment. But your brain, your central nervous system, uses glucose as a primary fuel, and it requires a continuous supply. And if you're not consuming carbohydrates, then you're going to have to use this gluconeogenesis. But that's like trying to get from Los Angeles to New York by bicycle, right? Consuming carbs is way more efficient for you to get glucose. And it's like driving there or taking a plane versus riding a bike, right? One is going to be more efficient. A life without carbs is not going to be an optimal life. And I don't think it's going to be a healthy life in the long run. But actually, so if we had an analogy, I would say not consuming carbs and having to rely on gluconeogenesis to get glucose in your bloodstream is like taking a skateboard with a broken wheel from New York to Los Angeles. You'll get there eventually, but it's going to be ugly. So what is glucose? It's a simple sugar, which is an important energy source in all living organisms, and it's a component of many carbohydrates. Glucose is the main type of sugar in the blood, and it's the major source of energy in the body cells. Glucose comes from the foods we eat. And as mentioned, the body can make it from non-carbohydrate substances and body tissue such as muscle tissue. Now, there should be a light bulb going off here. You can make it from your muscle tissue if needed. So yes, your body will cannibalize itself in order to make glucose. Glucose is carried to the cells through the bloodstream. It's so important that even after prolonged fasting, the body will begin to degrade its own skeletal muscle to keep the brain functioning. It will preserve your brain at all costs. And to keep the brain functioning, gluconeogenesis continues to generate glucose, but it needs alanine to get started, right? It's required. And that comes from, it's an amino acid that comes from skeletal muscle. So just to recap, in the absence of carbohydrates that you consume, the body will utilize non-carbohydrate sources in a process called gluconeogenesis. It's a very inefficient process that transforms non-carbohydrates, such as the amino acids from protein in your muscles, into glucose. And gluconeogenesis occurs in the liver and the kidneys, in case you're interested.
I don't know about you, Adele, but I work too hard for my muscle to have lack of carbs eat my muscle away.
Yes. Yes. And this is why, a high protein diet is so important during dieting, so that when you are losing weight, you're not just losing body fat and muscle tissue, you're primarily using body fat, because this is what's going to happen in the absence of, carbs and calories and things like that.
Yep. So basically, if you're going to low carb it, you're going to need to make sure that protein is nice and high.
Yeah. So what do carbohydrates do? Well, one is this protein sparing effect, right? Research suggests there's increased protein breakdown or muscle breakdown when exercise is performed when carbohydrates are low, which could lead to greater losses in muscle. However, there's been some new research, and I mean very new, which contradicts this finding. I need a deeper dive into this. I'm trying to have some questions answered from some other nutritionists, but essentially, I feel quite safe to say that as long as protein is high and you're not in a calorie deficit, it doesn't matter if you follow a low-carb, high-fat diet or a high-carb, low-fat diet. But if you're in a big calorie deficit and your protein is low and your carbs are low, you are probably going to lose more muscle tissue. Carbohydrates also help you maintain your digestive health and provide optimal health, because we mentioned those vitamins that you get from carbohydrates. The fiber helps with your digestive health, colon health, diverticulosis. All of that is helped with extra fiber in your diet. How much fiber should you have? Just as an aside, you want about 14 grams per 1,000 calories per day. For most women, about 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day. Diets with lots of slow digesting, unprocessed carbohydrates that contain high amounts of fiber have multiple benefits for your health. They help with satiety, that feeling of fullness. As I mentioned, they optimize your digestive and colonic health. They help your gut microbiome with a diversity of flora. You want to ensure you're consuming lots of resistant starch and dietary fiber, and this comes from whole grains, nuts, vegetables, fruits, beans. All of those are carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates can help sleep. Some people don't know this, but having a meal higher in carbohydrates toward the end of the day can help a person to sleep, especially if they are dieting and kind of cutting back on the carbs. And we do this with clients. There are some clients who really react negatively to a low carb diet, and some that are just, they're fine, they tootle along. It doesn't matter if you drop their carbs. This is where the individualization is so important in our coaching. But Tiffany, you've done that, right? You've given people more carbs in the evening, or suggested that they maybe push some of their carbs towards the end of the day, and they'll sleep better as a result.
Yep, absolutely. I think that it's really important to, kind of experiment with how your body manages different situations. And I think that sometimes it can be quite comforting as well to have a carb before you go to bed, because carbs generally can be a pretty comforting food. That's where your sweets and your treats and stuff come in. And I think that there's some benefits of having something like that as well before you go to bed,
Yeah. I think a lot of people, I think also when people are busy during the day at work and stuff, they don't get those cravings as much as they do in the evening. So having some room for those treats at the end of the day is kind of nice.
Absolutely.
Satiety and palatability. Okay, so carbohydrates can help a person feel full. This is because of the fiber. It provides volume to the meals without a lot of calories. Carbs can also make food more enjoyable, which is critical to a really sustainable approach to weight management. If you've been yo-yo dieting for a while and you cut out carbs and then you go crazy, so it's this binge restrict cycle, I think maybe it's time to look at adding more carbs into your life. A low carb diet can also mess with your thyroid. So I have Hashimoto's. I know some of you have Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. A low carb diet can mess with your T3 levels. Carbs actually increase T3 levels, the metabolically active hormone in your body. And this is even after adjusting for energy intake. So you take somebody on 1,600 calories a day with a low carb diet and 1,600 calories a day with a moderate or high carb diet. You can increase your T3 levels with having more carbs. So what are some of the symptoms of low T3? It's things like fatigue, increased sensitivity to cold, constipation, dry skin, weight gain, puffy face, muscle weakness, hoarseness, that kind of thing. So it might be worth experimenting with if your thyroid numbers have not been looking so good and you've been low carbing it.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, exercise performance. Carbs are a really important thing for sports performance, especially for certain types of athletes, which we're going to get into.
Yep. And then one other thing about the exercise performance is that it doesn't, whenever you're exercising, carbs can affect your performance differently. So just depending on how you're training, it may not affect your strength overall, but it may affect your recoverability and how long your rest periods are between sets and things like that. So it gives you more energy to get through those training moments.
Yeah. So that's on this slide. Like your demands are going to vary depending on many factors. Your body weight impacts how many carbs you can have. Your activity levels, like how long do you train for? If you go for 3-hour runs, you're going to need some intra-workout nutrition, primarily in the form of fast digesting carbs, high in glucose. Training frequency. Do you train often, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week? Do you do double workouts? You're going to need more carbs. Training type, as Tiffany mentioned, strength is not really affected much by carbs. I personally find in the short term, not so much. In the long term, yes. Mm-hmm. Mostly where I feel an impact in my strength training is that I get gassed out really quick and I need to rest longer between sets. I just do not recover between sets as well when my carbs are dropped. And if they're dropped significantly, I remember one time I almost blacked out. My blood sugar dropped so much, and I don't have a problem with blood sugar, but I had no glucose. I had no carbs coming in. So what I did was I ran next door. There was a pizza shop. I ordered a Coke. I drank the Coke. 20 minutes later, I felt amazing, and I continued my workout. And, it's as simple as that. The carbs saved the day. Sugar saved the day. And sugar is actually used as a tool by some athletes when they're training. Some athletes will consume almost pure sugar when they're highly active.
Yeah.
Sugar is not necessarily evil. It's a tool. What else? Environmental factors. Oh, yeah. So training type. So people who are strength training are not as impacted as much. People who are running and doing high intensity cardio will be and need more carbs. Goals. What are your goals for yourself? Do you have physique goals? Do you have weight loss goals? Do you just want to manage your weight? Do you want to build muscle? Things like that. And we're going to talk about amounts you should have for those different situations. And environmental factors. Go ahead.
I was going to go back to training type real fast. You mentioned that depending on your goals, your carb intake should change. And I want to let everyone know that that's actually something we do with our transformer clients, is clients who do train and they don't want to give up their training. If we find that they're having a problems adhering, if they don't have energy, then we're going to say, okay, well, let's go ahead and increase your total carbs per day, because that's going to benefit you in the long run. So those are, times where we even use this and increase carbs as well.
For sure. And they can still lose weight,
Yeah.
So I was talking about environmental factors. Well, this is very interesting. Carbohydrate requirements for exercise are actually increased in the heat. And this is due to a shift in substrate utilization toward carbohydrate oxidation. So hotter it is, more carbs.
Mm-hmm.
Also, personal enjoyment. I personally would prefer to have a diet higher in carbohydrates than fats. Mm-hmm. I know some of our clients prefer a higher fat diet, and that's fine. At the end of the day, though, we don't want our clients eliminating carbohydrates completely or going very low, except in special short-term, situations.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mentioned carbohydrates are not essential for survival. That said, if you want an optimal life with optimal health, do consider your carbohydrate intake. The blue zones have been studied around the world. This is Italy, Greece, Costa Rica, Japan, and Loma Linda, California. And all of these people in these regions have very healthy lives, and they are the longest lived populations in the world. And they eat a very high carbohydrate intake. We're talking 70% for some of them. So of all their calories coming from carbs. And I also want you to think, I think in North America, this obsession with low carbing, it's really America and Canada, because when you go to Europe, they eat lots of carbs. They love their bread. Okay. I was just in Greece. There is not the obesity problem that we have here, but they eat a diet high in carbohydrates. Asians eat a lot of rice on a daily basis. So much for white rice making you fat, they eat a lot of rice. Poor health and obesity really has to do with nutritional deficiencies, which come from not eating enough diversity of foods. Sometimes also poor health comes from eating an excess of calories for too long. Mm-hmm. As the Greeks say, everything in moderation. So let's discuss requirements. I would love it if you're watching this and you did a little calculation for yourself, okay? So what is your goal? As I mentioned, there's a difference between just getting by and thriving, right? If you want optimum performance and health, then think about these goals here, okay? Many of our clients cannot believe how much more energy they have when they're properly fueled. And when we have them reverse dieting, we start reintroducing carbohydrates, their energy starts going through the roof. Would you agree with that, Tiffany?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
That's when they actually start wanting to exercise, when maybe they didn't want to exercise before, because now they're adequately fueled. So I would like you to calculate your macro needs right now, okay? Let's use a 150-pound woman as an example. You can use your own body weight. Choose what your goal is from this table. Okay, in this scenario, we've got a woman, maybe she wants to gain muscle. That's her goal. She wants to optimize her muscle mass. We really would look at protein first. That's the most important. But according to this table, we'll say 3 grams per pound of body weight for her. Okay, that's very high. Sorry, I shouldn't be choosing kilos here. I should be choosing per pound. So make sure you do that. We'll just go with, she wants to optimize muscle gain. So we'll say 1 gram per pound of body weight. That would be equal to 150 grams of carbs a day. Mm-hmm. Now, for some of our clients, they'd be like, that's a huge amount of carbs. It's not actually. It's on the lower end. All right. If you wanted to lose some fat, you probably wouldn't want to go lower than 0.5 grams per day. With some of our clients, we do, but that's about 75 grams of carbs a day for the 150-pound woman. Okay. Now, you might be like, well, if you're new to macros, because I'm talking about macrograms, not weighted grams. But let's take the 150 grams of carbs a day for this person. How would that add up? Well, an apple is about 22 macrograms of carbohydrates. Flour tortilla, depending on the size, is about 22 grams. A slice of bread could be anywhere from 11 to 22 grams of carbs. So if you had a sandwich, you might be looking at about 40 grams of carbohydrates plus whatever you got stuffed in the sandwich. So a sandwich, maybe it's 50 grams at the end of the day, right? For a meal. That's not too bad. 50 grams of carbs for your lunch, right? You add a piece of fruit, now you might be at 75. And if your total is 150 grams for the day, you can see how it adds up quickly. But remember, this is a range. Okay, you can be on the low end or the high end or anywhere in between. Any questions about this?
No, not that I'm seeing. I'll refresh it to make sure.
Okay, keep in mind that as exercise increases, your carbohydrate requirements will increase. So for people who say, I gain weight just looking at a carb, my thought process is you're probably fairly sedentary and not active enough. Okay.
And that can kind of be a loop too, because you're not eating enough carbs, so you don't have any energy. And you add carbs in, but you are still trying to stay in the same habits that you were in. And therefore, that's where the weight gain can start happening. So the goal here is, if you are going to experiment with things, always make sure you take a look at your daily lifestyle. How active am I? What opportunities am I missing to move my body? What can I do to get my daily movement up a little bit? So there's always an opportunity there.
And it all adds up really quickly. Like, that's why we have people track their food for a while, because they really are not aware of how fast this adds up. Like a creamer in the coffee will add carbs, chewing gum adds carbs, a fruit, a nibble, a bite, a candy, all of that starts to add up to your total for the day.
Yeah.
So the takeaway here is it's possible to have higher amounts of carbs and lose fat as long as you remain in a calorie deficit. So you need to figure out what your energy needs are for you. And first thing you want to do is figure out, how many calories do I need in a day to maintain my weight? And we have a calculator on our website, which you can use. It's a free macro calculator. If you go to delfrizel.com, it's under the resources tab. And you can check it out. Now, it'll be accurate within a couple hundred calories, plus or minus, probably, because it doesn't take into account every scenario. But start there. If you're gaining weight, drop a couple hundred calories. If you're losing weight and you don't want to lose weight, then add a couple hundred calories, right? And just go from there.
Well, I do have one thing to add to this that we didn't really talk about. And that is, if you go to our calculator and you calculate your carbs and it's twice as much as what you're eating right now, expect a jump on the scale. Don't ask if it's going to happen, expect it, because there will be a temporary jump on the scale. Because, as I like to say, what's the full name of carbs? Carbohydrates. Well, so the carbs are hydrating your body, basically. Whenever you eat a gram of carbs, your body is holding on to 3 or more grams of water weight. So if you do have that initial jump, don't over restrict the next day. Do it again, do it again, do it again. You have to do things consistently in order to see the true effect that you have on your body. If we only do it for one day and then we freak out and we drop it back down, then we're never going to know if our body leveled out and how our body continued to progress moving forward.
Yeah, we like to say one data point is not a trend. And Tiffany, you've worked with clients that took a week or 2 weeks for their bodies to adjust and for the weight to come off after you bumped up their carbs. So you got to give it time. But the takeaway here is, it's not what you eat, it's how much you eat. We've had clients who come to us because they thought they should cut out carbs to lose weight, but they actually gained weight on a low-carb, high-fat diet like the keto diet. Being in a calorie deficit is the only thing you need to do to lose weight. But the macronutrient composition of those calories, like how many carbs, how many fats, how many protein, can make a huge difference in how you look and feel. And again, by macronutrient composition, I'm referring to how many fats, how many carbs, and how much protein you consume in a day. And you can use our free macro calculator on our website to figure that out for yourself. Key points here: carbohydrates are not the enemy, okay? You can still lose weight eating carbs, and larger amounts of carbs are recommended for active individuals. And that's it. So people who are watching this right now are in my Facebook group, Healthy, Fit, and Unstoppable. If you are watching this on YouTube, please join us. We have a growing Facebook community of women, over 2,300 members currently. If you're interested in some nutrition coaching and training, you can visit the website, delfrizel.com, look for the programs and services tab, and you'll see all of our coaching programs there. All right, well, thank you for your time today. Tiffany, any comments, anything you want to share there?
No, everything, no more comments in the comment section. Thanks for coming to this talk, and let us know if you have any other questions. If you heard something and you're like, I would like to know more about that, we're happy to clarify anything for you.
Yeah. Next week, we're going to give you some tips for holiday eating. Maybe you don't know it, but Americans tend to gain half their body weight for the year in a 6-week period between Thanksgiving and New Year's. So we're going to give you some tips for holiday eating so you can manage your weight a little more carefully maybe this year. Okay, see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.